Health Today is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance Insurance, agent represented by BGI Insurance Limited.
It's a word that no athlete wants to hear, injury, and unfortunately, there is always a chance of it occurring in sports, whether it's in the popular knapsack, B-sack or carifta, or a competitive game of road tennis, basketball or cricket.
A high-impact sports is an activity or sport characterized by intense or frequent wear and tear on the weight-bearing joints, i.e. the foot, the knee, the hip, the spine. And they can include netball, football, basketball, water skiing, running. As you can see, some of these will involve contact, some of them will not involve contact. So therefore you can have high-impact sports without contact.
A non-contact injury last year sidelined Mario Burke, the fastest teenager in track and field in the Caribbean for 2015, when he suffered a damaged hamstring. A contact injury is what was described as the worst foot injury ever seen in basketball in Barbados, when Burger King Clapham Bulls guard Daniel Lovell appeared to break his right ankle after landing awkwardly on the foot of Orange 3 Pinelands Raymond Simmons as he attempted to block Simmons's fast break layup in the Corporators General Insurance knockout competition in February.
High-impact injuries may result in acute overstrain, or we used to call them overuse, but now we call them overstrain injuries. Sorry, acute injuries, overstrain or overuse injuries, or acute on chronic injuries, where you have an underlying strain where you get an acute injury on top of it. Acute injuries include contusions and fractures, as you would expect. Basically sudden disruption to bony or soft tissue integrity. Overstrain, usually tendinitides, bursitis, any disruption to soft tissue or bone from a repetitive overload. Acute injuries occur during these types of things with sudden severe pain, extreme tenderness, reduced range of motion, reduced power, and visible signs.
However, there are some basic steps sports physician Dr. Llewellyn Harper prescribes for reducing the chances of an athlete being benched.
Like CPR, everyone involved in sports should know this. Everyone involved in sports should know CPR, okay? Clearly there are some limitations and modifications to the rest, ice, compression, and elevation, like if you have catastrophic injuries like head or neck injuries, okay? Those don't require ice and etc. Those require getting to the hospital as soon as possible. Prevention, properly fitted headgear, mouthpiece, appropriately fitted equipment. Appropriate equipment, meaning it must be appropriate to the game and fitted to the small ones and that sort of thing. Pre-participation examination, the report suspected symptoms, always have an evaluation after head injury. Education and protection also of the officials. The officials are the ones who protect. Education, all stakeholders, in other words, anybody who's involved in your sport at all. All right, critical role for officials to play, involve the family, beware of overzealous coaches and players. They never want to come out. All right, the responsibility of the official, basically, one of the primary responsibility is for the safety of the players. Not just for the coach and what's not, but for umpires as well. So you always look to make sure the field and arena of play conditions are safe, the integrity and suitability of the equipment. Availability of the appropriate support plan for medical emergencies, ambient conditions. Basically, just make sure that we do everything to prevent injuries. Some injuries are not preventable.
But he says for this to be effective, there must be an in-depth background check.
You ask questions, like emphasis on the family history of sudden death, whether there's any Marfans in the family, whether there's anyone in the family who ever died of an early cardiac problem. Also, if the person has unexplained fainting, heart murmurs, palpitations, dizziness, heart conditions can be easily missed by screening, but you've got to have a high index of suspicion, no CPR. At the end of that video clip there, you saw someone doing CPR there, all right? Signs and symptoms: chest pains, fainting, dizziness, palpitations, fatigue, inappropriate shortness of breath. If the history is abnormal, evaluate before the person goes to play. No matter if there are the Akila Joneses of this world who's going to bring Barbados their first gold medal, evaluate. If there is anything wrong, evaluate.
Dr. Harper maintains that if sports officials concentrate and do what is needed for athletes and look to first pick up, second prevent, and third treat, then athletes will not suffer from these injuries.